I'm mixing it up. I'm in a little bit of a different location, and the primary reason is because, as you guys can see there, is actually -45 outside, and that is way too cold to be outside, especially filming videos. So I decided to move inside for this video, and that really won't change the whole fact of the topic of this video and still the overall content of this video. Out of the way, that is why I'm in this room, and I may be in this room on this filming particular platform for the next few episodes, generally because it'll be -40 to -30 for the next week. So I'm going to be talking about my favorite grinds for bushcrafting or just outdoor knives in general, and it's through my experience and what I really recommend for beginners to maybe even intermediate and advanced people. As you know, in the previous video I talked about blade size and why I like smaller knives like these and some of these knives. But today, like I said, I really want to talk about grinds and what have been my favorite. Into my favorite grind. My favorite grind is the Scandinavian grind. Now, I do have more Scandi grind knives. I just want to pull out 4 here so I have a nice 4 and 4. But it is truly the Scandinavian grind. I really like how this edge performs in many different ways, whether it's Scandi Vex like these two, or it's just normal Scandinavian grind like these two. Overall, I really like the Scandinavian grind for the primary fact that how it performs when cutting wood, such as notching, making tri-sticks, as well as making feather sticks. It is a very good grind. In addition to that, it also has a very good tip strength I found with most Scandi grinds, especially this one. I've made many netting needles with them, and overall they've held up very well. I've never even worried about the knife tip breaking off, unlike some other knives. It is very good. A very good tip strength in general across the board. I have not found any full Scandinavian grind knives that have any tip strength issue. In addition to those few reasons, so long as it isn't Scandi Vex, I also find that Scandi grind knives are very easy to keep sharp in the field because you're only dealing with one grind. There's no bevel. They're extremely easy to keep sharp. But those are primary reasons that most people like Scandi knives. But like I was saying, really for me what does it is just how they perform with wood. They are one of the best grinds that I've found, at least as far as general performance, with so good that I've even been able to make light spoons with these knives. So overall, just their whole woodworking ability far exceeds any other grind I've used. Now that does come, there are some problems with these grinds, and really the largest problem with them is when it comes to skinning and dressing game animals. Now I have done a lot of it with especially this knife, but because you're pushing so much steel through different materials, like if you're pushing it through meat or flesh, it's very, if you guys know flesh, it's very tacky and it likes to grab things. So that is one of the issues with these knives, is because they have such a large, because the grind becomes so large so fast when you're dealing with materials like flesh or meat or different natural materials like fungi. They can actually grip and have a very hard time pushing through those materials. So that is the largest downside that I found with Scandi grind knives. But once again, for my particular bushcrafting, I find about 70% of my work is woodworking overall, just doing different things with wood. Then about 15% of it is working with, different meats, fungi, natural materials, and processing those kinds of things. So most of my work is done with wood, and that is why I have stayed so keen to Scandi grind. My second favorite grind is the full flat grind, which are these 4 knives here. Once again, I have more full flat grind knives, but I'm just bringing out 4, kind of like equalizing. But these have not always been my favorite. I've really only started to like full flat grinds here in the last couple years, and really this last year, where I've had a lot more experience with them. And they are not necessarily the best grind for beginners, just for the fact that they take a lot of a lot more skill to properly utilize, just for the fact that because you don't have this wedge, when it comes to dealing with wood, you're actually pushing this much steel through the wood, and so making notches can be significantly harder with a full flat grind because of the fact that it doesn't really want to peel the wood back or really split the grains out, even when making notches. When making tri-sticks, they're definitely harder to make with these knives, and you have to put a lot more pressure on them to get them to perform as well as a Scandinavian grind, and especially in woodworking. However, because they have such a thin edge behind the bevel, they are extremely good for processing game animals, natural materials, fungi, all that kind of stuff. They're very, very capable at doing that, and that is one of my favorite things to do with full flat grind knives, is process things. I find that they work extremely well for that task in particular, but they are also, like I said, once you get more skilled with them, they are as good as Scandinavian grinds are. But like I said, they are fast becoming one of my more preferred grinds. As you guys can begin to see, my knife collection is filling out more and more with full flat grinds. Though I still definitely like Scandis, I am getting more into full flat grinds. Though, however, like I said, I still would not recommend full flats for beginners. That I don't actually have on the table here. It is one that I have used in the past. These two are Scandi Vex, but I'm actually going to be talking about Convex itself. And Convex is a really good mixture between Scandinavian and full flat grind. Like, if you mix those two grinds together, you would pretty much get Convex, and it really performs exactly like a mixture between a full flat grind and a Scandinavian grind. It also keeps some of the issues that these knives have. One big issue, and I totally forgot to mention it, with full flat grinds, one of the largest issues with them is the fact that because on a full flat grind knife, the grind starts to get smaller and smaller as you go down. It also gets smaller and smaller as you go forward. As you guys can see here, the tips on these are inherently weak because of a full flat grind. These two are not as bad, but especially this one here, this is probably the worst for being a tip weakness. That's because it's already such a small piece of steel here. But you can see just how thin this tip is, or hopefully you guys can see how thin that tip is. I know it's not focused, but you can see how thin that tip is. It is very weak. I've never made netting needles with this one because I would likely snap the tip on it if I tried to, just because it's so weak. And convexes also still hold, for the most part, that issue that full flat grinds have with, they get smaller and smaller this way and this way, or I should say thinner rather. But if you can live with that one fact, which as you guys can see I can clearly live with it, this convex is pretty good, and it is actually my most recommended for beginners. The only problem is most knives that have convex are more expensive knives, but if you are a beginner and you can get a convex, they are very good because, like I said, they're really a mixture between these two grinds, and I found that with my convex grind knife use in particular, I found them to be very good at making things like tri-sticks, notching wood, carving wood, except for the whole tip weakness thing. They're very good at working with wood, but in the same turn, because they naturally have very little steel behind the edge, they are very good at skinning game animals as well, or skinning dressing game animals, is why it's number 3 on my preferred grinds. But once again, it would definitely be a very good grind for beginners. I do not have one on here because, like I said, in particular, at least for me, I never really loved the convex grind just because it was a jack of all trades but a master of nothing, and I would rather take like one of these knives, or maybe even like this knife and this knife, or this knife and this knife. I'd rather pair two knives that are dedicatedly really good with their particular grinds, and instead of having one knife that's okay at everything but great at nothing. So that's why I ended up actually not getting any more convex grinds. The only other problem with convex grinds that I totally forgot to mention was the sharpening, or the sharpenability of them. Now yes, you can pretty easily field sharpen a convex grind if you have the right things. Primarily you need like a mouse pad or some kind of softish foam that's kind of stiff but not too stiff and not too soft. It has to be like a mouse pad consistency and with like some sandpaper of multiple different grits. And that's great and all, and you can certainly carry that stuff out into the field, but what I've always disliked about that is that you have to have these specialized pieces of kit to deal with sharpening that edge. Whereas with these knives, especially the Scandis, you could, if you found a flat stone, pretty easily put a working edge on any of these knives. These, it would be a little bit harder because they have a bevel, but if you learned how to sharpen the bevel, it would be easier, certainly easier than a convex grind, because there's very few ways out in the field that you could actually sharpen a convex grind, because you have to hit it on the entire convex and sharpen it like that, unlike traditional V edges like these. So that is probably my largest downside to the convex. I personally actually never found the convexes to feather stick very well, at least for me. I found that with these, with full flats and Scandis, I can pretty much just like set them on a piece of wood and they make really good feather sticks, whereas with the convex, I had to really try quite hard to make good feather sticks with them. But that could just be me or the knife I had. Once again, I didn't test a gigantic amount of convex grinds, but the one I did just kind of had problems, or at least maybe it was me, something in the equation. I could not make very good feather sticks with convex grind knives. But convex grind, that is now on to the fourth grind. Now this is a Scandi for anyone that's wondering why I'm not going to cover this. This is pretty much a Scandi with this weird little thing to it. But now on to flat grinds. These two are flat grinds. And flat grinds are essentially, in comparison to a full flat or a Scandinavian, flat grinds are a lot like a Scandinavian grind, but with a noticeable bevel. And you guys can see this, like some Scandi knives have a micro bevel, and that's okay. But this has like an actual noticeable bevel. Like you guys can see this little shiny piece right at the cutting edge, or on this one, you guys can see that. Hopefully, yeah, you guys can see that bevel there. That is a noticeable bevel that you guys can see, and that's what makes a flat grind a flat grind. Essentially, it's just ground from whatever point the knife maker chooses to nearly the cutting edge and then beveled. So it's a lot like a Scandinavian grind, and overall, flat grinds are not terrible. They're my fourth because generally, once again, kind of like the convex, they're more of a jack of all trades and a master of none. So that's why I generally tend to steer away from those jack of all trades grinds, is just for the fact that I do like specialty grinds, grinds that are very good at what they do and maybe not so good at some other things. Because like I said, I'm not that scared of carrying multiple knives like these two, you know, as a team. So another grind that I do not have on the table but do have experience with, and that is the hollow grind. And the hollow grind is a very good grind for everyday carry knives. I really like it in the knives like the Sabenza by Chris Reeve. It's a very good grind for everyday carry where you're just opening packages and everything like that. It's also a very good grind for skinning, because with it, unlike all these other knives, if you guys understand how a hollow grind is ground, it's ground pretty much the opposite of a convex, so it's more like a concave grind. So there's very little steel behind the actual cutting edge, and the cutting edge, aside from when the hollow grind actually flares back up on the back end, the very cutting edge, the bevel, is the thickest thing, so it makes processing game animals extremely good. On the other side, it can be a more weak grind and have the higher potential of breaking, like the edge actually fracturing or cracking because there's so little behind it. As well, I found it not to actually be a very good grind for anything but skinning. As far as outdoors use goes, it's not a particularly great grind for anything but skinning, and so it excels really well at skinning, but that's pretty much where everything stops. And I know you guys may be like, oh, well, you carry these knives that are specialties at only one thing. But that is because these actually do okay at other things. The hollow grind actually like sucks at other things, you know, besides skinning. And the fact of the matter is, like I said, 70% of my outdoor time is spent carving on wood, or overall doing things with wood, and cutting it, notching it, all that kind of stuff. So I spend about 15% of my time dressing game animals and processing natural materials. So when I spend so little time on that, I don't want to have necessarily a knife really good at it. Once again, these knives, while they're more geared towards skinning than these also can do pretty good at woodworking and taking on those tasks. Hollow grind, like I said, I had a few knives for outdoors that were hollow grinds, but I really disliked them and got rid of them. So I don't have any more hollow grinds for outdoors. And like I said, that has been my thoughts and overall experiences with grinds. Like I said, I've used quite a few over the past 5 to 6 years, and really I always come back to Scandinavians. I actually very first started out with some flat grind knives, but once I found Scandinavian grind knives, I just fell in love with them. And really these are my absolute favorite grinds. If I had to just pick one knife, it would still have to be, in the Scandinavian grind family, and they're overall very good. Once again though, I will say full flat grinds are fast becoming one of my favorites. Definitely not my favorite, but one of my favorites, and I really like a lot of the attributes to them. I think there are a lot of people getting better and learning more about full flat grinds, especially like I said with the tip weakness. On these two knives, this one, the Schrade, and this one, these have very actually robust tips, and I would probably not be that scared needles with a tip that is this thick or thin. So like I said, full flat grinds are definitely improving, and the people that are making them are learning more about them and tips. But that is my thoughts, like I said, and don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe, and tell me what your thoughts are and what kind of grinds you guys use and like. I'm always curious to learn what you guys use, so definitely let me know in the comment section below, and I'm out.